Hey indie film lovers, thank you for tuning in to Indie Cinema New York on BRIC TV. I'm your host, Kweighbaye Kotee, Bushwick Film Festival Founder and indie film enthusiast. On today's show, I have two guests who have been trailblazers in the indie film scene in their respective ways for decades. Joining us is Dan Nuxoll, Program Director at Rooftop Films, and one of my favorite directors, Ira Sachs, whose newest film, Little Men, will be playing at Rooftop. Dan has been with Rooftop Films since the beginning, and he'll give us a history of the festival and an overview of what audiences can expect this summer during the festival's 20th year anniversary. Ira is a long-time New Yorker and film director who's been making films since 1989. Before Little Men, his previous features included Love is Strange, starring John Lithgow, Alfred Molina, and Marissa Tomei, Keep the Lights On, and 40 Shades of Blue, which stars actor Rip Torn. Today, Ira is also one of the leading voices in LGBTQ cinema, but before we get the conversation started, let's take a look at the trailer of Little Men, screening at Rooftop Films on July 15th.
Hi, Mrs. Cavelli. Ryan Jardine. We've met.
Of course. I'm so sad for what has happened. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry.
It's my grandfather's funeral.
Sorry for your loss.
Oh, that's okay.
So you're the grandson. So how are you enjoying Brooklyn so far?
I like it a lot. We have much more space. It's great. It's a lot more peaceful than Manhattan.
You know, you're gonna like this neighborhood. It's become a very bohemian area. Did you draw this? Wow, Jake. It's actually getting good.
Can't tell you how happy I am that Jake has a new friend. You have a great kid there, but I guess you know that.
My parents are married. They just don't live together.
I don't understand.
Me neither. Your dad ain't good at acting?
He's not that successful or anything.
Maybe you can give me a couple pointers, because I want to be an actor when I grow up.
The genesis of acting is seeing, understanding what makes behavior. I did it again.
I did it again.
You did it again.
You did it
You
again.
did it.
You.
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 You. You did it.
You did it.
You did it.
I didn't do it.
Get out of my face.
Get out of my
Get
face.
out of my
Get
face.
out of my
Get out of my
face.
face. Get out of my face.
Ryan hasn't made any money in years.
That's not my problem.
We need the shop to cover its rent.
Our parents are involved in a business matter. It's getting ugly, so they're taking it out on us.
Tony, you need to go home now.
One of the hardest things to realize when you're a child is that your parents are people too. You understand that? They care about things. They make mistakes. They try to do what they think is the right thing to do. Does any of what I'm saying make any sense to you? Say something, Jake. Say something!
Gee, thanks, Dad. That's a very encouraging story.
That was the trailer to Little Men, directed by Ira Sachs. Ira, Dan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Dan, let's first talk about Rooftop Films. You right now are one of the best attended festivals in America, 30,000 attendees. Wow, can you tell us like how the festival started and how you got it to where it is, or how you contributed to getting it to where it is today?
Sure. So Rooftop started 20 summers ago. The very first screening was organized by the founder of our organization, Mark Elijah Rosenberg. He and I had gone to Vassar together, and when we got out of college, he was looking to put together a screening of a bunch of short films, some of it which were by friends and a couple of other filmmakers he had met around New York City. And renting a movie theater was expensive, but sneaking up to the roof and throwing a party with a projector was free. So, obviously, partly it was out of convenience, but also largely, building off of that, we understood that creating screenings in an environment that was different and felt more inclusive, and that wasn't, a black box indoor location, but instead was an outdoor location where you were interacting with the city and the other film goers and the filmmakers and musicians that perform in our screenings, and bringing that all together into one big event was a great way to get people to come out to see movies that we felt very strongly about, that should reach an audience, but might otherwise be not the easiest films to market sometimes.
Oh, indie film pains. That's definitely part of the field.
We try to relieve some of the indie film pains. That's our job.
You know, let's switch the conversation over a little bit to Little Men. Ira, in the film, you touched upon major themes such as friendships, love, gentrification. What is Little Men about, and what inspired you to tell this story?
Well, I have to say, watching that trailer just now, I thought about the fact that last summer I was walking around with a group of 30 or so filmmakers in Brooklyn making this movie, and it was such a film about this neighborhood and this city, and so it's great to think that now it's in other people's hands. It's out in the world. To me, I moved to Brooklyn in 1988, and I moved to a corner on Smith Street in Carroll Gardens. I was the white gentrifying college student coming from in my U-Haul, pulling up to a primarily Italian neighborhood, a Dominican street, and actually the film in a way is about that corner. It's not specifically set in the corner of Smith and DeGraw, but it's about that corner and how these different communities try to get along or not get along. Specifically, in this story, it's about two boys who become best friends as their parents become enemies. They're fighting over a small Brooklyn storefront.
Wow, that's a great way to sum up such a big movie.
Yeah. You got to figure that out as an indie director.
So, you know, I've seen Love is Strange, Keep the Lights On, and 40 Shades of Blue. And it seems like a lot of your films are talking about people who experience love in different ways, especially Keep the Lights On, which was very personal. How, can you tell us a little bit about the film, and how have you healed since you made that film?
Yeah, well, Keep the Lights On was a film I made in 2000, came out in 2012. It was about the 10 years of a relationship. Inspired by the one I was in just before I made the film, and it was really from the beginning to the end. It was a film about people who were hiding a lot from everyone around them, and yet by the time I made that film, that was not who I was as a person, and so I think the film is a very open film about sexuality and intimacy and drugs and a lot of things that I guess I'd spent my life trying not to talk about. So the film was, it wasn't in itself the process that made that possible, but it sort of reveals that as a person, over generations, over decades, 20 years, whatever, we've been doing this, that I became more open with who I was.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely related to that. I mean, I went through heartbreak, and I was just like, oh, I understand what it looks like to not love yourself and let somebody else, you know.
Right.
So before we go to the program overview, I have one last question. Since it's such a huge, you know, Orlando's happening, you're one of the leading voices in the LGBTQ cinemas. Like, how has the tragedy of Orlando impacted you and your work moving forward, you think?
It's interesting. I was invited this past weekend to a dinner on Friday night by a woman who had a child in the same preschool that my kids go to, and she's a Muslim woman who felt in the wake of Orlando she really wanted to reach out to her gay and lesbian friends and community, and so she organized a dinner that was at the end of at the end of Ramadan, one night of Ramadan. So that she brought Muslim and gay people together to kind of, and gay Muslims together to kind of talk about the impact. And what was interesting to me was how rare that experience was to actually learn from an intimate perspective about the Muslim experience here. And I feel like, I hope that is what comes out of this, is more conversation, more identification. You know, that we're not all after just a small sort of part of the world for ourselves, but that we actually have to share and communicate.
Yeah.
So, but, you know, the big issue to me is guns. That's really what this is about, is that guns in America are just, it's just a shame. It's a great shame. So hopefully, there was Gay Pride, there was a big group doing Gays Against Guns, and they were, and I think it's a movement. I think it's the idea that each of us has some responsibility to what our government chooses to protect.
Yeah, well, that's definitely a whole conversation we can go on for, will probably be going on. But, you know, we're gonna wrap up in a few minutes. Dan, I just wanna ask what audiences can expect at this year's program. And I know there's another film called Death by Audio that also has a similar themes like gentrification that's also playing at Rooftop. So can you just give us a little bit of what we can expect at Rooftop this year and tell us a little bit about Death by Audio?
Sure. So the Rooftop Film Summer Series runs all summer long, and we go through August 20th of this summer with some special screenings in September as well. So we've got outdoor screenings of new independent films, 3 or 4 of them every week, all throughout the summer. And we show movies from all across the world and all different subjects, but certainly we always leave a certain number of slots open for our favorite films relating to issues that are directly relevant to New York. And certainly Ira's film falls into that category without a doubt. And there's a few others that we're also really excited about. One of them is Goodnight Brooklyn, the Death by Audio story. And Death by Audio, for those of you who don't know, was a rather iconic underground music venue mostly for indie rock, but for other music as well, in Williamsburg. Created an incredible do-it-yourself environment there that people really responded to and gathered around. And they created this great community, but as Williamsburg rent prices shot through the roof, they were eventually evicted when Vice bought their building and kicked them out. So it's a beautiful story. It's it's a little bit bittersweet, but we've got a great screening of that coming up on July 9th. Just a week before showing Ira's film. We also have a great screening. Every year we do a program called New York Nonfiction, which is short documentaries about New York. That's on July 8th at Industry City. We'll be showing movies on a couple of roofs, and it's all great stories of those New York tales that you might not otherwise have come across. Amazing.
That's it for this episode of ICNY on BRIC TV. Thank you again for joining us, and special thanks to our guests, Dan Nuxoll and Ira Sachs. Little Men is screening at Rooftop Films on July 15th at Industry City in Sunset Park. That's correct, right? For tickets to the screening and for a full list of the festival program, visit rooftopfilms.com. ICNY is produced by the Bushwick Film Festival. You can visit us at indiecinemanewyork.com.